Alright, so hey everyone, today I want to take a look at the Deadzones for Dragonball Xenoverse 2. This is being demonstrated on the Xbox Series X, just in case it differs on other platforms. But to get into it, Movement has a few different Deadzones. One is in this hub city, Conton City, and the other one is in combat scenarios. So to start with this city Deadzone, we have about a 62 or 3% radial Deadzone. So this is a pretty large Deadzone size. But you can see that there's a threshold under this. And what that represents is you can see that I have to move the stick past the red region to start moving. But if I pull back, you can see that I'm still moving. I have to move under this lower threshold to be able to stop. And you can see that this lower threshold is mostly circular, but seems to flatten out near the axial regions. There is a restricted diagonal movement around the axes, so if your stick is in any of these blue regions, you'll be moving perfectly in one of four directions. In this case, perfectly right, perfectly forward, perfectly back, and perfectly left. You'll only start seeing diagonal movement once you break into these green regions. And you can see that this also goes into this in-between threshold. You can see diagonal movement begin pretty abruptly, and that's indicative that this axial restriction the input is not being scaled around this axial restriction. So angles within this restricted range are completely lost. So, and as you can see, it flares larger inward. So you're getting more restricted ranges the closer to the Deadzone and less the further away. As you can maybe see, if I'm right at the Deadzone, this is most abrupt, but I'm running, you can see that it's not quite as abrupt. The running animation can mask a bit of it, so on this little vehicle, this vehicle Deadzone is actually larger than the movement one. It's about 70%, but the restriction is the same, so you can see that that snap a little more obviously. The shaded region represents the run threshold, and this is basically perfectly at 90 and perfectly circular. So the Deadzone is very large. One of the things that mitigates this a bit is that for the most part you're going to be pushing the stick fully, so you won't have to worry about the large Deadzone size. But if you wanted to walk, there is a somewhat limited range for that, so reducing the Deadzone size would help be able to discern better between that, but that's not a huge issue for this type of game. Same with the axial restriction. It would be better for a full diagonal movement to be possible, but since you'll mostly be moving the stick fully, you'll only have really this 10% of restriction to worry about, and that's not a lot that's being cropped, but it'd be better if it wasn't there, but not a huge deal. Alright, so we're in a combat section, and we can see that the movement Deadzone has gotten huge, so much larger, so it's now at about 90% and perfectly circular. There is a pullback threshold here present too, but it's too small to really demonstrate on this video, but it functions exactly the same as in Conton City. And this, of course, applies when flying as well. The restriction is exactly the same, and maybe more obvious when flying too, because we don't have the run animation to mask it. So there is no kind of walk and run threshold. There's only one speed once you exit the dead zone. And as I said before, this can kind of mitigate it because you're going to be mitigate the dead zone size because you're going to be pushing the stick fully anyway. But definitely there wouldn't be any harm in having a much smaller dead zone size than this and allowing full diagonal movement. Now the camera is about a 42% sort of bloated square dead zone. So you can see that in the corners it comes to a bit of a point, and the vertical range caps very early. And we actually have the same amount of restriction as movement. However, there isn't an additional radial dead zone on top of this, so we see how this connects to the dead zone more. But as with movement, if your stick is in any of these blue regions, you'll only be moving in one of 4 directions, in this case left, and you only start seeing diagonal movement occur once you break out of this into the green regions. So similar also is this is unscaled, so if we move right at the dead zone, we can see this change to diagonal movement is extremely abrupt. But if we point to the edge, this transition is much more gradual. It seems a little faster because it's max tilt, but it is more subtle. And that's because there is less being restricted, and you're allowed more subtle angles than right around the dead zone. The acceleration curve is starts at 10% of your total speed, so you can see that starts pretty abruptly. And then actually starts a little slower and then builds up until your maximum turn speed. This appears to be actually a quadratic curve if we project this based on these tested points. It's just that there's an overlying dead zone that seems to be cropping into it. This projected quadratic curve seems to be scaled around a 15% dead zone size, and there's an additional dead zone on top of that that's eating into it and having you exit the dead zone at a faster point along the curve. This dead zone shape you're seeing here is actually created by a radial dead zone being established and then an axial dead zone being set up on top of the output scaled radial dead zone values. So this is like the cross dead zones we see, but it's being warped by the radial dead zone. The exact, it doesn't seem like the radial portion of this would be 15%. It should be larger, but there's some, these could be all distinct dead zones that are being there. So there could be a 15% dead zone that the curve is being scaled to, and then this additional radial dead zone plus axial dead zone being built on top of that too. So all those could be present. The last thing to cover would be the sensitivity. So you can see that I'm playing on the maximum sensitivity, and in combat this is the speed that represents. And this actually differs between in combat scenarios like this as well as Conton City. This maximum or the sensitivity in combat is actually the lowest sensitivity available. The next fastest generally is in Conton City, and the fastest is actually with the Scouter. And I'll do comparison. It uses the exact same Deadzone, as you can see. So, and the same curve. So you can see how fast it is at this position. If I exit, you can see that it clearly speeds up and slows down. And this is a little silly for the Scouter because normally when you zoom in, the sensitivity slows down. So in combination with the very large Deadzone, the fast starting speed, and the heavily restricted and also lost diagonal movement, this feels extremely clunky to control, but I'm sure in most cases players are going to lock on, so this doesn't really apply. Now, if you're familiar with the video I did for the breakers, this is all pretty consistent there. This was a similar issue in that game's controls. And in Dragon Ball games in general, having large Deadzones and restricted diagonal movement seems pretty common. And to reiterate, for movement, a lot of this is mitigated just by only really needing to push the stick fully. But it would be better for smaller Deadzones in general and to have full diagonal movement. And the camera, while general camera movement is the issues don't affect general camera movement, it would be of course nice to have full diagonal movement and smaller possible speeds just for general fluidity. But of course in this type of game it's not that big of an issue. But that about covers things, so thanks for watching, and everyone have a good rest of your day.